So what is your name?
Gloria, Margaret, Teresa Bosse. Yes, Bosse.
And when were you born?
January 29th, 1928.
Could you tell us a little bit about yourself right now?
Well, I'm 87 years old, and I have a wonderful family and a very good husband whom I love very much. We're going to be married 68 years next month.
Wow, that's awesome. How old were you when the Great Depression began?
Well, the Depression was before, like, I think I was kind of very, very young. My parents were having their family, and I was maybe 8, 9, 10. I remember those years
Mhm.
because my mother, I went to school, and we couldn't get clothes or rationings or whatever.
Mhm. Was your family severely impacted by the Depression?
Yes, because no one had work, and you really we had, the poverty was very bad because I remember when my father used to be a shoe worker and they had no work, and then that's when the unions started coming in too.
Mhm. What kind of struggles did your family face like on a daily basis?
Well, my mother had 5 children, so she had to really scrimp and save, and we had a lot of economy meals. We had chickens in our yard, and we had a lot of chicken and dumplings and chicken stew and very good food anyway. We never went hungry.
That's good. What was the hardest part for you and your family of living through this time?
Well, where I was so young, I didn't have too much concept, but I, um, I think being without and seeing my family struggle, my father looking for work was the hardest thing.
Mhm. Did you witness people around you in your town struggling as well?
I think everybody did. And then the government too, if they had extra food, they would bring it to the town halls and that would be distributed to some people in need.
Mhm. Do you remember how much, like, when you were a teenager, like a gallon of milk or a loaf of bread cost?
Well, I think when I was, that was, the Depression was before I was
Mhm.
a teenager. But during that time, I think bread was a nickel, 5 cents a loaf. And I remember going to the store and getting bananas that were mostly ripe because the store man would give some to my mother and father for us children. But there were milk. Well, we had our own milk because we got it from the dairy from my
Mhm.
grandfather's cows. And we had eggs, so we really made out pretty well.
That's good. What did you do for fun as a kid?
A lot of outdoor stuff.
Mhm.
Went sliding. We lived in the country, so we'd go sliding when there was snow, and we played games, and we played with the neighbors and my brothers and sisters. We entertained ourselves. We never went to town or anything like that for foolishness. We
Mhm.
just we just made do with what we had. But we played red light and giant steps and all those kind of games.
Mhm.
Blind man's buff.
What was fashion like during this time?
Very plain. My mother, we didn't have a lot of clothes. There was not a lot of money to buy things, so the government used to send material, and I remember my mother getting some flour sacks and bleaching them and making things, and then they would probably send bolts of clothes. And I remember one time my mother got some blue and white and a bolt of red and white. So she made us, my sister and I, each a gingham dress. And we wore it to school,
Cool.
things like that.
Did you have to start working at a young age to help your family out?
Oh, in high school.
Mhm.
That was later on in years.
Yeah.
I did always, get part-time jobs when I was in high school, and I would turn all my money into my mother and father, because I was the oldest and they needed the help. So I got an allowance, very small.
What were means of transportation like for your family?
Well, we always had a car, because we lived in the country. I remember the old school bus that used to come around. And it had, at first it had, when I was in the first grade, which was about 1933, they had leather blinds coming down in the windows to keep out the cold in the winter.
What was a typical supper meal in your house like?
Oh, mostly, we had a lot of hamburger patties. My mother used to do wonderful things with hamburger patties, and she'd let them simmer and make some nice gravy. And then we always had chicken.
Yeah.
But she was very good at making do. And she always sometimes made a cake if she had the materials. She'd make a nice cake, but she had to make it from scratch, so.
How do you think the living through the Great Depression has impacted your life and your knowledge of life?
I think it really made me appreciate what I have and what, and everything's just not handed to you. At that time, we had to work for what we wanted. I mean, we had to wait until it was our turn to get something. So now I'm not picky, and I don't always want this or that, because I know I was used to that when I was younger. I used to have to share clothes and share everything.
So now let's move on to more of the World War II part of your life.
Right.
Did anyone in your family serve in the war?
My uncle, but other than that, we didn't have any relatives that went.
Do you remember your first reaction when you heard that there was a war going on and that the U.S. was part of it?
Well, they bombed Pearl Harbor on a Sunday, December 7th. And the next day, I was in my first year of high school at the time. The next day I went to school, and that's when President Roosevelt declared war. And I was sitting in the principal's office, because that's where we were gathered to hear the radio. And so we really were shocked, and I don't think I quite got the full impact because I was still young, but we were horrified with fear that how it was going to turn out.
How did the war impact your family?
Well, it made us do without a lot of things. We had to give up a lot. We had sugar rationing, and we had, everything was rationed. And then my grandmother had a flag in the window with a star on it, because they had stars on them. Like, he had a silver star because he didn't die or anything, so. If someone had died in the family, they would put a gold star on the flag in the window. But we never had to do that, thank God.
Oh, that's fortunate. What was it like to be in school while the war was going on? Like, was it scary?
Well, not scary too much, because we never really feared that it would come over here. But when I was in high school, that was when 41 to 45, and that was the height of the war, and the boys were all leaving school because they just would join the service if they wanted to be patriotic, or else they were afraid of not graduating. But for one reason or another, when I graduated from high school, we were 36 in the class, but 8 of them were boys, the rest were girls.
Do you remember a specific moment during this time period that impacted you a lot?
I think the day that they landed on the beach at Normandy, I was in my 3rd year of high school, and it was our principal told us that they had landed in Normandy, or I forgot where, but we were all kind of shook, because we knew some of our fellow classmates might be going there too.
Mm-hmm.
So we all kind of worried and prayed and were scared a little.
Mm-hmm.
We never feared that the war would come over here, though. We didn't have that fear.
Mm-hmm. Do you feel as though your parents and your community sheltered you from the truth about the war, or do you feel like you had access to enough information about what was going on?
I think going to high school, I had enough information, and I don't think they hid anything from us, so that the radio was very busy, and we didn't have TV at the time, and we didn't have,
Mm-hmm.
some people didn't have a radio. But we always were well informed.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that was different for your siblings? How old were they at this time? Do you think they were sheltered?
Yeah, they were about 2 to 5 years younger than I
Mm-hmm.
was. And I think we were all about the same. I think they all kind of felt it the same way.
Um, did your family help at all in the war yet? Like in my history class, we talked about um, buying bonds and having victory gardens. Did
Mhm.
your family do any of that sort of
Well, we
stuff?
could never really afford to buy bonds, but my father went to work as a carpenter building the barracks at Fort Devens.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was his career, starting in carpentry, building, but they built a lot of those. And then we always had to go without because of gas rationing and everything, so we just didn't go very far.
Mm-hmm. So, what were your opinions about FDR?
I liked the man. I thought he did a very good job. He had a lot of problems.
Mm-hmm. Having lived through this time period, would you say it's affected your perspective or personality at all?
Well, like I say, I think I learned to appreciate what I had and not expect too much. You know, I think our generation really learned to appreciate what we had and not look for something.
Mm-hmm. Were you ever afraid of the atomic bomb during the Cold War?
Well, we really didn't know that much about it. We were always kind of sorry to see those people in trouble or hurting, but we knew that it cut the war a lot shorter. It would have gone on a lot more, and we would have lost a lot more boys.
Mm-hmm. And finally, do you think you would be different from who you are today without having lived through this in your childhood?
Maybe. We didn't have chances to go to college or anything because there was just no money.
Do you have any stories or memories from this time period that you'd like to share?
From the Second World War or after?
Both.
Oh, after the Second World War, when you met your grandfather and your great-grandfather and, no, just her grandfather.
Great-grandfather.
Yeah, that's right. Her great, sorry about that. I don't mean
It's
to be
okay.
messing you up. I'm confused. 87 years old, you know, I got a senior moment. But anyway, I met your great-grandfather, and we got married, and that's when you really kind of realized what the Depression was then, because you couldn't buy anything.
Okay. So, would you say overall that having this part of your childhood has had a negative impact or a positive impact on how you are now?
I think a positive, and the negative probably helped me to realize the good things so that it turned out to be positive. So I think it's all in your attitude and how you take it. You can be a poor loser and cry about it, or you can say, well, we're pretty good.
Okay. Well, thank you for your time, Meme. It was nice talking to you.
Nice talking to you too.